Synchronicity. It's time for another installment of the Canadian Third Party Synchronicity Rating Authority.
I really think that this is part of the way precognition has to work. That to prevent paradox, it has to be this unconscious thing.
Okay, guys, welcome back to the Grimerica show. We are going to be chatting with Dr. Eric Wargo a little bit later about synchronicities as precognitions. It's actually a pretty elegant idea. I like it quite a bit. And of course, this is another time machine episode, recording this quite a bit ahead of schedule. This is coming out while we're on a little vacation.
Well, you are.
You're on a vacation. Graham's just on a vacation from
I'm on a vacation from you.
Yeah, he's on a vacation from me. In all aspects, really. You won't have to deal with me at work, or on the podcast.
Yeah.
You'll be texting me by day 3.
No.
You'll miss me.
Oh, no.
Call me something. That's why today I will go with Graham. You should learn how to do the show notes Dunlop.
We were talking about some cross training in the studio here.
Yeah.
Well, and we just go through this. We're trying to figure out we do these checks, right? Sound checks and stuff. And we try and make sure the audio is good. Darren's a bit of an audiophile. And we had this cord plugged into his clipboard yesterday.
Oh, didn't work. The clip cord didn't work. It was staticky.
It was the cord. We figured out it was the cord. So it's another cord we need. And then today we come in and it's fine. Yeah. It's just working.
Literally nothing got touched.
Nothing got changed. And then...
Unless maybe it's when the mixer warms up. We'll see what
No, it can't be the mixer warming up.
No, it really can't.
And then there was stuff going on with my audio. So, things are always changing.
It was
just
just crackling. I don't know why. I would like to just put the whole thing back together with high-end cords. Because I really think like that. I don't like the EQ. I like the fucking compressor gate. And I like the preamp. Actually, I'd like to get a bigger preamp. I'd like to get a 4-channel preamp so that when we do other in studios, their mics are as hot as ours.
Yeah. Yeah, that's ideally where we want to be.
So really, I want to do everything. But the mixer's good. The computer's good. And the compressor limiter gate's 4-channel, and it's good. So all I really want is a new EQ.
In other words, you've got gas.
I've got more gas.
Big time gas.
Yeah.
That's gear acquisition syndrome.
I want a new EQ. I want a new preamp.
Listen to the greedy guy.
Well, I'm not saying right now. I'm just saying like...
And we also need to support Adam Curry's venture and buy like the actual little portable thing, and then we wouldn't need all that stuff. We could
still going to get it.
Eventually. Jesus.
None of that stuff is bad, right? I think the 4-channel thing is going to be like $250. And so it's like you get one, and we get one in 6 months and another one in 6 months.
Yeah.
Like it took us 4 years to get all this shit.
Yeah.
It's just the stuff that will eventually start.
Yeah, exactly.
As we can.
It would be nice to have more people in the studio for sure.
And have the mics as hot, because right now those people are yelling and we're, it's just a mess.
Yeah.
And I think the biggest problem there is a preamp. And I think we just need new cords, because when we started out, we were buying all the cheapest cords.
Yeah.
So we're like,
I guess that really does make a difference.
Well, now all the Chinese shit is just wearing out.
Yeah.
No offense, China.
That's true, though.
I didn't mean to get into all that right away, but check out Grimerica.ca/support.
Hey, we wouldn't even be able to do any of this without the support.
For the people that support us now. Yeah. I figure I've got it in at about 1 in every 250 listeners supports the show.
Excuse me.
Does that make you sick?
Yeah.
That's not bad. It'd be nice to get that down to like 1 in 100.
Yeah, 1 in 100 would be good. Yeah.
Yeah, 1%.
Yeah.
Be a 1%er. Check out Grimerica.ca/support. Sign up for a monthly, whether it be $1 a month, $2 a month, all the way up to $30 a month. You could be the top of the pile. I did also want to mention there's been a few cancellations lately. I know that's a big possibility that people just get sick of us.
Really?
Yeah, but I do other
cancellation of monthly subscriptions.
Yeah, but other people also get new credit cards and stuff. Maybe they forgot about the show. So if you have got a new credit card or anything like that, Maybe double check your subscription from time to time. The last thing I'm going to do is email you if it happens.
Really? You don't want to do that?
No.
How did you find out about these cancellations?
Email.
From PayPal? Or?
I get an email from PayPal, yeah.
What does it say?
But according to what I've heard on No Agenda, that it happens quite a bit to them.
Yeah.
And those people are getting an email saying we canceled their shit.
Yeah, so we haven't canceled anybody's
don't cancel
stuff.
anything ever. No.
Yeah, that's good to know.
So, yeah. Grimerica.ca/support, guys, if you can. Help me with my gas.
Yeah. And just the normal expenses that aren't gas-related.
Monthly expenses, yeah. Well, our monthly expenses are a little over $200 a month at this point.
How about Graham's credit card?
Yeah, that doesn't even include internet, power, or anything like that.
That's right. So what we do usually in the intro is we just ramble on a little bit, talk about, beg for your support, and then we have listener feedback and emails, and sometimes we do little segments. I got a good one for you today. I got a listener email with some geoengineering stuff in it. It's fantastic.
Are you doing the Richard Greer breakdown too?
Yes, I'm going to do the Acknowledged.
You're all excited.
The movie Acknowledged, and we'll do the little review of that.
And we're interviewing Neil Kramer right after.
Yeah, so that's just a good night altogether.
Bingo bango. So what do you got first then?
Let's do the geoengineering one, I guess.
Graham is an all-in believer in chemtrails.
It's been a long time. I had to play it.
Can't do my favorite one, eh?
I'll play it after. I'll play it out with that, okay?
Okay.
Do you know that this is people's all-time favorite jingle?
Really?
You know how disappointed they would be if I stopped playing? There's people in a couple different countries that have that as their ringtone.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Now I've had a couple requests for... So actually, Felix, if you could give me an ISO of the blubbity blah, I've had a couple requests for that as a text tone.
I don't even remember where that came from.
Blubbity blah.
Okay, so this is an email from CJ. And it says, "Hi, Graham, you may find this interesting." And he sends a link to a bill. This is I don't know, so this is a good one. And he also says, also found this video to lead to some interesting areas. And it was a YouTube video of this lady talking about why she thinks that chemtrails going on. And it's all about the barium. Barium has many functions.
Barium?
Yeah, like releasing electrons from atoms and all kinds of, other stuff. But anyways, the main thing about this is this bill. I'm trying to find it here in this old computer. So this is the state of Rhode Island, H6011, and it's relating to health and safety, the Geoengineering Act of 2017. Get this. This is pretty new. It's from March 24th, 2017. It was introduced. It was referred to the House Environment and Natural Resources. So they're adding a chapter to the general laws entitled Health and Safety. Chapter 23.8, the Geoengineering Act of 2017. The short title, this chapter shall be cited as Geoengineering Act of 2017. The intent, geoengineering is defined herein as the intentional manipulation of the environment involving nuclear, biological, chemical, electromagnetic, and or other physical agent activities that affect changes to the Earth's atmosphere and or surface. The Rhode Island General Assembly finds that geoengineering encompasses many technologies and methods involving hazardous activities that can harm human health and safety, the environment, and the economy, the state of Rhode Island. It is therefore the intention of Rhode Island to regulate all geoengineering activities as further set forth by the terms and provisions of this chapter. So the findings of fact, the scope of geoengineering, inclusive of solar radiation management and other technologies. Geoengineering activities are diverse and vary greatly in their characteristics and consequences. Geoengineering may involve ground-based and or atmospheric-based deployments, including, without limitation, the use of aircraft, rockets, UAVs, drones, and or large balloons. Solar radiation management, geoengineering activities requiring state licensing, including without limitation. Cloud cover production, that's Ariel Reese's... Aerial releases of water vapor producing man-made cloud cover. Cloud whitening, that's sea salt or other particulates injected.
Whoa. No cloud whitening around here, bud.
To make the clouds more reflective, after which the salt or other particulates rain out over land areas and freshwater supplies. Salt flare rockets fired into clouds. These rockets trigger rain downpours containing salt. Space sunshades or sun shields. Huge parasol-like devices reducing the amount of direct sunlight reaching the Earth's surface. Solar shields or atmospheric sunscreens, reflective particulates such as sulfur dioxide and aluminum oxide released into the atmosphere block sunlight from reaching Earth's surface, after which such particulates rain down as pollution. Don't forget, this is an act in the government, state of Rhode Island, trying to figure out how they're going to control the geoengineering that's already going on. Right? Thank you.
Otherwise known as chemical trails.
Reef.
Dropped, sprayed.
That was just
throughout the
after my
United
rant.
States, England, Scotland, Ireland, Northern Europe, and I have personally seen them not only in the United States but in Mexico.
All right. Number 6.
Birds are dying around the world.
Birds are dying around the world. Reflective space mesh mirrors. That's wire mesh mirrors deployed in space, reducing the amount of direct sunlight over the Earth's surface. Planetary sunshades. These largest of SRM operations uses particulates to cover over time the whole Earth, stripping the ozone layer as much as 76% and reducing the amount of direct sunlight reaching the Earth's surface.
Wouldn't you have to increase the ozone layer for that?
I don't know. Stripping the ozone layer by as much as 76%. So, yeah, that's weird, eh? How would actually reduce the amount of sunlight after stripping the ozone?
Yeah.
I guess it's covering over time, so it's covering it, reducing the. I don't know.
Yeah, don't speculate.
I'm not a scientist.
No, don't speculate.
Artificial ionosphere, a sustained high-density plasma cloud is produced in the Earth's upper atmosphere. Large helium balloons, which release atmospheric contaminants, and rocket emissions, including water vapor, which is a greenhouse gas. Additional geoengineering activities requiring state licensing without limitation. Ocean fertilization by iron or lime seeding. Re-icing or cooling the Arctic or other areas through artificial means. Ocean cooling pipes. Weather modification involving the release of sea salt, silver iodide, barium, and or other particulates to enhance rain or snow in one area while reducing the availability of rain or snow in other areas. Genetically modified CO2-eating plastic trees. Glacier-reflecting blanket deployment. Land-based and ocean-based carbon sequestration. Carbon dioxide geosequestration and carbon capture or removal, which processes involve capturing what is considered waste carbon dioxide and depositing at storage sites. Nitrogen removal and sequestration. Carbon black or carbon black releases, deliberate atmospheric releases of soot to produce artificial weather events. Atmospheric deployment of radio frequency microwave radiation other than that needed for safe aviation or deployment of other physical agents for stated and or unstated purposes. Unbelievable. Aircraft geoengineering activities include those carried out from any type of aerial vehicle, rocket, drone, or balloon that involve the release or deployment of any nuclear radiation, any biological or transbiological agent, any chemical substance other than the aircraft's fuel emissions, which are harmful but necessary for flight, or any chemical mixture such as chaff, any electromagnetic radiation other than radar and radio communications necessary for aircraft safety, or any physical agent, shall be subject to regulation, including the licensing process pursuant to this chapter. Consequences. Oh, this is a good one. Okay, this is it's almost done here. It's quite long, but it's almost done. This is consequences.
Consequences.
Where'd it go?
Oh, ran away.
So this is chapter E. Consequences. Documented problems arising from geoengineering activities include, but are not limited to, global dimming, causing reduced vitamin D absorption in humans and animals, and reduced photosynthesis. changes in distribution patterns and chemical contents of local rainfall, contamination of air, water, and soil as particulates fall to the Earth's surface, degradation of human, animal, and plant health when people and other living organisms are exposed to falling particulates and other atmospheric contaminants, the acceleration of biodiversity and species losses, especially the loss of endangered and threatened species, less direct sunlight reaching the earth, fewer winter freezes, and higher humidity resulting in increased molds, mildew, fungi, and pest problems. Increases in acid rain loads from the airborne injection or releases of sulfur and aluminum oxide with human, animal, plant, and water resource degradation. The near impossibility of restoring natural resources with the undermining and devaluation of state-funded conservation programs. Changes in microclimates, local weather, and large-scale climates within short periods with greater likelihood of increased and cascading effects. Droughts and flooding, which may severely impact state, regional, and global food production. Increases in ultraviolet radiation. The decay of decades of the ozone layer, potential recovery. The burden that airborne reflective particulates must be repeatedly replenished since their atmospheric time is limited. Visibility impairment and clutter impeding aviation safety and increasing the likelihood of small and large particle collisions. And then finally, economic losses to various sectors of society and the state itself resulting from, without limitation, health damages and increased healthcare needs, contaminated soils and drinking water supplies, decline of fisheries, loss of pollinators such as bees, decreases in agricultural crop yields, dead and dying trees, loss of habitats, pollution cleanup costs, and decreases in solar power production from lack of direct sunlight reaching the Earth's surface. So that gives you a good idea. I won't read the rest of it. It's talking about definitions and all that. So where's this in the media? Where's this talking about how this affects global warming, right?
Global dimming sounds worse.
So they're out there propagating this fucking hoax about global warming. Like, I believe that now. I don't want to be too much of a believer, but I mean, we've talked to enough scientists on the other side, right? That, right?
Yeah.
This period of climate change is actually chill.
Bullshit.
It's chill compared to the last 15,000 years.
Climate changes.
And this is what we're doing intentionally. Probably all over the planet. So Rhode Island is trying to grab a hold of this, right? And control it. Like, you got to license it.
Isn't Rhode Island like 50 miles across?
Exactly. So good job. They're just going to be going around their little state. There's going to be a clean spot above Rhode Island.
No, it's just going to blow in.
But I mean, this is probably happening all over the world.
Probably.
Right? Where is that taken into account?
Maybe it's a chink in the armor.
It needs to be taken into account.
Okay. Ugh. You should go do a little Senate subcommittee hearing or something.
I started out with the 1978 Senate report, right? And it got a little dry because it was old and it was talking about like the 20s and 30s and the 40s. And then I got into the patents were fascinating. There's a list of patents.
Fascinating.
I mean, this is all happening, right?
This is just fascinating.
And now this.
Believer in chemtrails.
Anyways, I don't know if I'm thankful for Rhode Island for addressing it or just like, does it piss me off more? I don't know how to feel. Anyways, it doesn't matter.
Did you shut your ringer off now?
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
Sorry about that.
The audience thanks you.
It's my sister. She should know.
Should she?
Yeah.
You should know. Really. So what else you got? Ooh, don't you have, you want to do your rundown? What do I have for a jingle for that? Could be a Graham's rant.
Could be, yeah.
I don't know if I have that. Oh, no, that don't work either. I don't have the rant jingle on here yet.
Do you want to do the UFO quote real quick then, or what? We'll just get right into that. I mean, that could really...
Profound UFO quote of the week.
All right, my favorite part. This is the UFO quote of the week.
This is your favorite part?
I've been convinced
You've
for a long
interviewed
time.
over 200 of the greatest minds on the planet, and this is your favorite part.
Yeah. This is another greatest mind on the
Over
planet.
100 of the greatest minds on the planet.
I've been convinced for a long time that the flying saucers are real and interplanetary. In other words, we are being watched by beings from outer space. That's from Albert M. Chop, Deputy Public Relations Director, National Aeronautics and Space Administration. I should just say it like that. And former United States Air Force spokesman
I agree.
for
I would
Project,
support that.
for Project Blue Book.
Makes you sound like less of a hillbilly.
Yeah.
You make Canadians sound bad. Down at the NASA there, down in America, flying to the moon and shit.
I got a synchronicity talking about that. You want to go? Let's do that one.
Is this quote over?
Yeah.
So, this is a full of jingles, this episode. I haven't heard from Gitmo in a while. Let us know if you're okay, buddy.
Synchronicities all over the web. And Darren is skeptical about everyone and don't believe it yet.
It's a small synchronicity, so it's more fun. It's more fun because of what we're talking about. So this is from Mike. He says, "Hello, guys. I've been listening
Liberal
for
Mike?
a little... What? I don't know. For a little over a year now, and I really enjoy the show. I'm a pretty big believer in synchronicity, and although I know this one isn't much, and Darren will likely rate it very low, I'd like to share it with you guys. I'm an independent insurance adjuster, and I travel around for my job. Although I'm from North Texas, I'm currently in Eastern Tennessee for work. I guess the point is we do have nuclear power plants back home.
Ooh, you said nuclear, right?
I know. I really took a lot of effort. Anyways, I'm a bit behind. I'm a bit behind on the last episodes due to work, and the other morning I had an hour's drive to get to my first client. So I loaded up episode 219. Grimerica talks Fukushima and the death of the Pacific with Dana Durnford. So as I go to get off the interstate, I notice my exit was the same as the Watts Bar nuclear plant. On a side note, Watts Bar Dam is the subject of many haunting discussions. It was featured on Ghost Adventures. I thought, well, that's interesting. I'm normally nowhere near a nuclear plant, and the day I play the episode is the day I drive by a nuclear power plant. Here's the fun part. So I get to my client and introduce myself. To break the ice a little, I ask, so what do you do for work, and so on. And the guy replies in his very best Southern accent, well, I originally moved here when they were building the great, and he says, get ready for it, nuclear plant. Quickly thinking back on the intro of that episode, mocking W, I nearly lost my breakfast trying to hold on in my gut, bursting in laughter. Anyways, thought you guys might enjoy that as much as I did. Thanks for the great product and keep up the awesome work.
Fucking Rambo and George W. and some guy in Tennessee. Huh. That's a good one. What's going to get a 0.42? You know what? I'm going to give you a 6.42.
So he says, on a different note, I'm currently putting a website and a podcast together on the paranormal. It's called Undiscovered Origins. You guys follow me back on Twitter, and also thanks. I put together a few shows, asked for and talked via email a time or two with Kyle of Expanded Perspectives for setup support, and was getting things in order to get rolling. Then I've been working all over the place since November due to crazy weather, and that's been going on. I didn't want to put out contents and then stop again, so I put it on hold while I build up reserves to keep things going. I hope to be able to visit a few paranormal locations while I'm back east for some content. Anyways, I just want to say thanks for the inspiration, and hopefully one day I'll have a product that is half as great as you guys. Thanks again.
Or twice as great. That's funny because I actually helped Expanded Perspectives convert their artwork for iTunes back in the day.
Yeah, those guys are great.
Yeah.
Kyle and Phil.
Kyle and Cam.
Why did I think Phil?
Kyle Filson.
Sorry, guys.
Sorry, Cam. Thanks, Mike. I don't think that's liberal, Mike. Let us know if you're liberal, Mike. That's one of the guys in the chats.
Oh, right. Okay.
We've affectionately dubbed him liberal, Mike.
We didn't talk about the chats.
Oh, you love the chats. I haven't been in there much. Did I scare you out?
I feel bad because I don't have time to stay in there, so I feel like I'm just popping in.
That's what I do. I just pop in.
And then people say hi, then I'm gone.
Say crazy shit and leave.
But no, it's fun. There's some
dash cam
great
pics.
conversations. I thought you were actually going to have a rundown for us there because you were involved in some pretty interesting conversations.
I was?
Yeah.
About what?
I don't know. I just got the gist of it, but
Yeah, I don't know what I'm saying half the time. No, the chats are fun.
yeah. But good luck, Mike, with your podcast and stuff.
Yeah, let us know when you launch. And we'll
What was it
give you
called
a
again?
bump.
Undiscovered Origins. Yeah, it's good.
Discovered Origin. We'll give you a little bump. And yeah, check out the chats if you want. There's room for 30 more people. Grimerica.ca/hangout. That's right.
Yeah, it's all in the show notes. Links in the show notes.
Yeah, that's right. So there's room for 30 people. If you don't have an avatar, you will get fucking booted. Unless you're my mom.
We just found out
She's the
recently
only
it was.
non-avatar in there. And Neil Davies. I spared him.
Did you?
I don't know why. Probably because he's been around since day one, contacting the show, and I know he's a real person that sends you jingles.
Cool.
And he had just joined the day before, so I gave him some time. But actually, by the time this episode comes out, if he hasn't avatared up, he'll be fucking gone too.
We just found out we can only have 150, so people are having a hard time getting in there.
That's right. It's too bad you couldn't interlink them somehow. And then I
Yeah.
talked about doing like a Mastodon, but then a couple people were like, no, it's just not the same. You know, like the perpetualness of the chat is
Well, we should talk about that new social media platform. I mentioned it to you. I'll look into that.
Spark or Jump or Tango or whatever the fuck it was.
No, I can't remember. Here, I might be able to find it here.
Whatever. This isn't going to come out for a month. You should have sorted it by then.
Yeah.
The chats might not even exist by the time this comes out. But if it doesn't, I'll use the same link anyway. So,
Yeah, I got to find it. I do want to find it, though. So,
and I think we'll just develop an app eventually that fucking will have the chat worked into it.
I guess.
If we can ever get that together. That could be a couple of years away, but you know how to develop such an app, let us know.
Okay, so I'll do this little rundown then.
It'll run down.
This is the movie Unacknowledged from Stephen Greer. It's his new one. I mean, that's a very controversial subject in here. Because I go out and practice the CSETI protocols and stuff like that, and we had a couple other people on talking about it. Darren's got, anyways, there's some different opinions about the whole thing, but I gotta tell you, this movie, Darren, you should see it just as an overall view of what's going on. It doesn't get too crazy. Did you? What? No, you didn't.
Yeah, I watched it last night. I fell asleep, actually.
Come on.
I had a little trouble with the part where he started crying a couple of times.
Oh, yeah.
He was having trouble getting through that part, and it didn't seem to have an overarching,
I was thinking about
look
you.
at how great I am theme to it.
I was thinking about you.
Some of the
The
testimony
and the
and
testimony
the quotes was good, but
Yeah.
I mean the whole thing seems like I'm great, Greer, and I'm not getting enough. Fucking, I'm the guy.
Yeah, but he has put in a lot of
And he
effort to try and do
pretended to
this.
cry a couple of times.
He did.
That was not genuine crying.
You don't think so?
No.
So
Didn't expect that, did you? Were you going to mention the crying?
I think I have a note in here about it. Oh, maybe not.
No.
Yeah, I must have put one in here because I know
I jumped out right
I have-
away. I was like, what?
Greer seems
I was like,
humble.
What's he crying about? I got to rewind.
yeah,
I got
here,
to
you wanna-
rewind that to see
you
why
wanna
he's
say?
crying. And he's like, he's crying over nothing.
I've got 100 million a day on classified, and then I've got Michael Schratt, and then I got Greer gets all choked up. That's my notes on it. But he does seem humble for the most part, and he talks
What?
about the history of disclosure.
Are you kidding? He seems humble. Did you see the shots?
Well, with his childhood sighting.
The cinematography of him just looking great. Come on. Come on.
Well, maybe that was a different part of it. So, anyways, he talks about the history of disclosure, which was interesting,
That's
right?
right.
In
And the testimony was
2001,
great.
that was really
The
good.
testimonies were good.
And the history of CSETI going back to 1990.
He's
I mean,
just gotta
I joined.
remove himself from
Look, I joined CSETI in '94, and I heard about this thing happening, and he followed
Grundy
through.
went to it too. I don't know what it is.
Grundy did a good job of reviewing it.
Grundy's good shit. Check out Mysterious Universe.
So Act 2 is about the rabbit hole and talks about the NRO secrecy and NSA, CIA, Roswell connection, all that kind of stuff. The Canadian memo that Grant Cameron always talks about, he talks about that. And then USAP's the unacknowledged special access programs, right? The black budget, they think, is 100 to 200 billion a year, 100 million a day on classified.
100 million a day?
Yeah. On 100. Marilyn Monroe, right? Do you like that part?
The picture.
And there's a memo that, it's pretty damning.
Yeah.
She was going to blow the whistle.
I can't get over the cry. Ruined the whole movie for me. And
then they get into the media problem. Intel influenced the cash paid by the CIA, the Robertson panel, which was in 1952, basically saying the media's got to take care of this. And it's been pretty bad ever since. And then, the part...
There's a lot of interesting quotes.
Yes. And we were going back and forth into, the use of fossil fuels and pollution and all that stuff with a couple of our listeners,
quotes
right?
That you haven't used. I was actually stunned that I haven't heard these quotes before. I was expecting that the quote part, I should have been like fucking all over it. And there are all these great quotes that you haven't decided for whatever reason not to use.
That's why I like the movie, because it had a bunch of new stuff in it. It was pretty good, an overarching thing, but he really put it all together with a lot of new stuff as well.
I feel like when we have a quote segment, a profound UFO quote segment, we should be the guy that, got the
head of the game. Yeah.
Yeah.
He talks about Ben Rich quite a bit from Skunkworks, right? And he gets a little bit more in detail about that as well. And, we talk about fossil fuels here a lot, right? And this is kind of where...
How much was it?
What?
Movie?
I pre-ordered it. So I was really as soon as it came out, iTunes took it out of my account.
$20?
Yeah. So patent confiscation.
I'll never get back.
He talked about the patent confiscation, right? All the false flags and how maybe, Project Bluebeam and the UFO one might be coming. And the French documentary about making contact and the President Sarkozy. Like, there's some really good stuff in there.
I didn't get that far.
Yeah, you should finish it off for sure.
I fell asleep.
Yeah.
The crying was outrageous.
This is where the energy. He's right about this. This is where
for $20,
the pressure for new energy has to come out of this, right? People have to start getting upset that we're burning fossil fuels. Yeah, well, somebody's flying around in these craft.
Alien. Not saying it's alien.
No, people. The fucking breakaway civilization.
People from the future. The last
Could
episode.
Be. Yeah.
No, that's next episode.
Yeah, I know. Time doesn't matter here.
Time doesn't matter in the igloo. What the fuck else you got?
That's it, buddy.
That's it?
Yep.
We already asked for money?
Yep.
Sign up for the newsletter. So we'll talk about all the other shit that you can do that doesn't cost you money. Grimerica.ca/news. Sign people up for the newsletter. Tell people about this show. Seriously, you guys are our only avenue for marketing.
Yeah.
So you gotta be tweeting it and Facebooking it, or find some place to share the show if you can, when you can.
Tell us how you found it.
Tell us how you found the show.
Send feedback and emails, stories, synchronicities.
Yeah, all the contacts on Grimerica.ca/contact. We got a bunch of great bloggers. If you want to blog, shoot me an email.
Could talk about the Red Pill Expo as well coming up. Oh no, right. I shouldn't, because this is coming out the day of the expo.
You're at the expo. You're at the expo.
If you're listening to this, you might see me there.
Actually, I'm fucking driving back, right? I'll probably be back tomorrow. My vacation is over. Now I'm sad that my vacation hasn't even started yet.
There you go.
Son of a bitch. All right, guys. Enjoy the chat with Dr. Eric Wargo.
Ladies and gentlemen, please be released.
Station MXA calling. Station MXA.
Ladies and gentlemen, please be released.
Something's out there in space that regulations don't cover.
Ladies and gentlemen, please be released.
Station MXA.
The regulations don't cover.
All right, we've got Dr. Eric Wargo here. Let's just wait a sec here. Is that how you pronounce your name?
Yeah, Wargo.
I don't think I've said it aloud much. I just keep reading it.
Yeah, I know.
Wargo, right? Okay.
Yes.
I'm not starting over.
No, it's okay. All right,
How would you have thought it was? Could it be pronounced?
I don't know, Darren. It doesn't matter. It's just that the first time we've ever done that, so it's been pretty good. 225 episodes. All right, tonight we've got Dr. Eric Wargo here. He's a science writer in Washington, and he's been, researching stuff like archaeology, psychology, and neuroscience research. He's got a PhD in anthropology. He's got a really interesting take on synchronicities. He's got a website called thenightshirt.com, and there's tons of great blogs in there. I've been listening to them and reading them recently. Really interesting stuff. I'm sure we're going to get into some precog and synchronistic information and his take on it. So without further ado, welcome to the show, Eric. Thanks for coming on.
Awesome. Great to be here.
How you doing today? Good?
I'm doing excellent.
Right on. I think we should just, we talk about synchronicities all the time. People send in their stories to us. So we've read like a ton of firsthand accounts. Darren likes to rate them. I've heard you I've heard your episode on Skeptical a couple times. Like, it's really interesting because we often get into this chat after reading. I mean, there's your small, like mini synchronicities, but then there's these real complex compound ones. But a lot of times we get into this chat where it's a question of whether, like, could it be some sort of precog thing or could it be some manifestation? Like when you talk about the law of attraction and how our thoughts manifest things, you wonder if it's what comes first, right? Is it are you precognizing that this event is going to happen, or that this is going to happen, or are you manifesting it?
Yeah, that's a key question in parapsychology, and I, as you know from reading my blog, I've kind of got a pretty strong opinion on what's going on with synchronicities, and I do think it's precognition. I think that now, okay, let me say I won't say that there's no way in which we manifest things. Know, psychokinetic stuff. I'm not really, I really don't. That's not my area, so I'm not going to say that that's not operative. Yeah,
you're not dogmatic about it. Yeah,
right. But I think that precognition is, it's very well supported in parapsychology research. I mean, there's a lot of really robust support for the existence of precognition or presentiment, which is the sort of variant that Daryl Bem and Dean Radin, Julian Mossbridge, a few other people have been exploring, especially in the last decade, 2 decades, which is, sort of this unconscious response to, future events, usually very imminent events in our lives.
Yeah.
But when you combine that with all of the data, experimental data, but especially just anecdotal data on precognitive dreaming, all kinds of precognitive visions and prophecies and so forth that have been recorded throughout history, and compiled in really excellent archives, by the Rhines, for instance, at Duke University and so forth. It's just, overwhelming evidence that we are responsive to our future.
Right.
Now where I have gone with this, a lot of parapsychologists say, yeah, that's fine. It's, one of 3 classic ESP modalities. You have precognition, but then you also have clairvoyance and telepathy. Okay. Mm-hmm. And then other people talk about synchronicities and, how there's, an acausal connecting principle, all that the Carl Jung idea. Well, what I've tried to do is kind of push the precognitive idea and see, well, can this really explain those other manifestations? And I'm definitely not the first person to push that idea. for instance, very great parapsychologist Ed May, really thinks that it's all precognition. It's all some sort of manifestation of precognition. Because you can imagine that you say a remote viewer, is seeing a target distant in space, but you don't know that you have no way of confirming that until there's a feedback, until there's some future time point at which you learn, oh, that's what I was seeing. That's what I was looking at. And he's saying, well, what if you're just seeing that point of feedback? And I totally agree with that. And I think it becomes very interesting to kind of push the idea that precognition may be behind a lot of psychic phenomena, paranormal phenomena. And so that's kind of what I'm doing on my blog, I guess, is I'm trying to really push this precognitive model and see what it can explain. Mm-hmm. And I think it's a very simple explanation. I guess that's part of what I like about it, is that it's really a lot simpler, I think, than some of the other explanations that are bouncing around out there. And I'm kind of taking a sort of contrarian view, I think. I'm not, I wouldn't characterize myself as a materialist kind of bad guy. I mean, there's there's a lot of bashing of materialism these days, and I totally get where that's coming from. But I think it's really interesting to sort of take a very narrow view of precognition as this really personal, the brain's preview of its own future, and sort of the brain as this tunnel through your own timeline, and to see how far that gets you. And I think I really think it can explain a lot.
Well, the interesting thing about that is it doesn't even really make it any less profound for these people. You hear people that say, if you follow these little synchronicities, it's often a sign that you're on the same path. And if you're talking about future reward,
right path,
then you're noticing that you're noticing these things is the same thing in reverse, I guess.
Yeah, it doesn't really change the value. All it does, I love, the term synchronicity as just a term for when these events happen. It's, it's great. Yeah, that was a synchronicity. We all know what we mean when we use that term. And so in that sense, it's great that Jung gave us this term that we can use. What I disagree with is his explanation, his explanatory model that, it's this principle in the universe, this acausal connecting principle. It has to do with archetypes. It sort of collapses. He literally says it collapses the time dimension. Well, I think that the moment you say that something's acausal, you've essentially taken it out of the realm of science, because science deals in causes, right? I mean, there's no science. Science is all about causal explanations of one kind or another. Now, at the time Jung was writing, the notion of retrocausation was not really on anybody's radar. I mean, even the quantum physicists at that point were not really talking about that. So he can be forgiven for not kind of really, really wrapping his head around this possibility of sort of causal, two-way causal arrows, causation coming from the past, but also causation sort of pushing from the future, and sort of the events as sort of a handshake agreement between past and future. And now there's really mind-blowing experiments being done just in the past 6-7 years. I mean, really recent stuff in physics that's showing that, this is a real thing. And simultaneously, there's really, amazing work being done in, the new field of quantum biology. It's really, it's looking very much like the brain's going to turn out to be this, you don't want to overuse the computer metaphor, but it's going to be this quantum computer type thing, right, that may well be able to pass information back and forth through time. And at least that's, I think that's that's not an absurd proposition anymore.
So here's a question. Now, if that's the case, then does that then mean that does that take free will out of the equation? I mean,
right. That's the big sticking point for people. Absolutely. And I mean,
I kind of would look at it as a possibility.
Yeah. No, I have no trouble with jettisoning free will. And I know that sounds like, oh my God, what are you saying? But I would simply ask people to just try on this idea. I'm not saying you have to commit to jettisoning free will from your picture of the universe, but just, sit with it a while and meditate with it. And see if you don't ultimately find that maybe this whole notion of free will versus determinism and all that, maybe the whole question itself is a kind of MacGuffin that's not, I think that it's a kind of a hang-up. I think it's a hang-up for people. And I think it's a hang-up particularly for our culture because we're a very individualistic, free will culture. We very much prize, the notion that we determine our fate and so forth. But, it may, and just on a day-to-day level, I mean, there's no way you can't, whether there's free will or not, doesn't affect how you still have to get up in the morning. You still have to put on your pants and make your oatmeal. You can't just lay in bed because, it's all determined. So it really, in a way, it's just an idea. The idea of freedom versus the idea of determinism. These are all just ideas.
Well, and even if you did stay in bed, there's no way of knowing that wasn't, predetermined.
Right. I mean, it doesn't mean anything. And so I have this discussion with a lot of people because this is the first thing the first thing that people think. Well, what does this do to free will? And I really ask people just treat it as I come from sort of a Zen tradition, and I sort of for me it's become actually kind of a koan, a kind of Zen kind of riddle. You just kind of meditate on the idea of the universe as a glass block. That's the metaphor that Einstein's teacher Hermann Minkowski offered for space-time as this four-dimensional glass block, and everything in this glass block has a world line. Like every particle, every individual, is a line, extending through this glass block, and any moment is sort of a cross section of the four-dimensional, worm-like you that extends through the glass block. Just kind of meditate on that idea and see if the problem of free will doesn't eventually kind of vanish. And actually, the most recent post I wrote on my blog was about this and this idea in Zen. There are a lot of Zen stories about Zen masters kind of having this epiphany that, we are basically living in a glass block. Everything is permanent. And the flux of things and free will, it's all an illusion. And that's not depressing. when you have this kind of epiphany in a sort of a Zen frame of mind, it's incredibly exciting and liberating. It's not like this horrible, depressing, nihilistic thing that you might imagine. So I have this discussion a lot with friends who are sort of, on the one hand, they have one foot, in the precognition, retrocausation water. They kind of want to, join me there, but then they're kind of hanging back because, what does it do to free will? And another, you'll find that a lot of parapsychologists who are in this will sort of try and take a sort of compromise position by saying they'll invoke the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics, the idea that every decision point creates a new universe. So so at every particle, at every measurement, creates multiple universes. Everything that didn't happen happens in another universe. And I don't know. I just, I'm not a quantum physicist, obviously, but I feel like this is a cop-out. It's kind of a way to have our cake and eat it too. It's kind of a way to have all this quantum spookiness and but also preserve kind of these things that we value as humans, or at least we think we value, such as this idea of free will. But it's a complex question, yeah, because it's like it sounds when you say, oh, maybe there's no free will, that just sounds just horrible to people. I mean, that's just really repulsive.
Well, I can get on board with it on a macro level. I can get on board with it, right? Like maybe you can make those small decisions, like whether you're gonna have a Pepsi or a Coke or a water. But on a big level, I mean, it's a consciousness thing, right? Like your biology doesn't care about free will or have free will, and probably none of the other animals on the planet really give a shit about free will. Right. So I mean, even if you were to meet in the middle and call yourself like some sort of, AI sort of algorithm that's sort of learning as it goes based on experience, then I could throw free will out that way for sure.
Just make it free willy,
which starts to sound a lot more like
free willy. Oh, there you go.
It starts to sound a lot more like a program.
Yeah.
Than a person.
Yeah. Huh. So, because for me, there's a bunch of different types of synchronicities. There's those little ones where I'm listening to something on my headphones, let's say, and this weird phrase comes up at the exact same time I turn to look, and somebody's shirt has the exact same phrase on it. Like where's the precog in that kind of thing, or is that just a coincidence?
Well, I've thought about that problem. Yeah, there are those synchronicities that seem like it's some objective confluence of events that is independent of your own precognition.
Yeah.
And maybe, but actually, when you factor out all the other synchronicities that I think really are basically precognition or have precognition at their root, then that becomes a very small subset of synchronicities, and then I'm comfortable saying, well, that's just chance. There is just chance. I'm not. I don't want to be a reductive. Like one of these psychologists saying, well, it's all. We just are bad at estimating the probabilities of improbable events and all that. I think that's. While yes, it's true on some level, that does not explain. What the profound experiences that people have, the synchronicities and precognitive dreaming and so forth. But there definitely is that factor. And so, yeah, that's going to happen sometimes.
Yeah. And they're also, I could get into that as well. If there's a small subset of it, and some of those could just be random chance or coincidence, but then there also could be a hidden, maybe even a subconscious precog thing going on. Like maybe I turned right instead of left for some reason.
Exactly.
Or something led me to that moment of emotional resonance or whatever, or residue.
Yeah, exactly. Your decisions, very far back in time leading you to that point, could all have been, unconsciously guided. And this is really, I really think that this is part of the way precognition has to work. That to prevent paradox, it has to be this unconscious thing. You're not going to be conscious of precognizing unless there's just no chance of altering an outcome. Which is why almost all precognition, you realize, is only visible in retrospect. I think this is for me, this has been a really fascinating. This has been a really fascinating, probably the most surprising and fascinating aspect of precognition for me in my own kind of work with it. I've been, for the last few years, just very assiduously recording dreams and other, meditative visions and things like that, and hypnagogic states, and really correlating them with subsequent, it's like I've got, massive, piles of precognitive evidence. It's like I'm no longer in any kind of doubt about the existence of this. I mean, it matches everything that you see in the literature, but it's like, I think you embark on this path imagining that maybe, this is going to be developing a new superpower or something, and you imagine, I'm going to be able to use this to predict my future, and gonna, like, I don't have a lot of ambition to go to Las Vegas or anything like that. But the point is, but you imagine somehow you could use this to improve your outcomes. And I think you can, but it's not as simple as having a vision of something and using it to change your course of action. I mean, it's much more, you realize in hindsight how you were kind of unconsciously guided toward a reward. It's very much outside of it's very much outside of the whole domain of free will. So, if there is free will, it does not apply to the precognitive side of you. And it produces these synchronicities that are numerous. And I do, but here where I don't disagree with, synchromystics and people in a kind of Jungian archetypal psychology vein, I don't disagree that synchronicity is kind of an indicator of something. It's you're tuned into something that's good. You're tuned in. The more synchronicities you have, the better. It's a kind of indicator of a kind of I don't know. I mean, it's an indicator. The more synchronicities, the more precognitive dreams you notice, the more, probably the better off you're going to be. Because you're just being intuitive. I think being intuition is the most basic, I think, expression of precognition. I think intuition is entirely precognition. I don't think it's drawing inferences based on memory and creating an action plan based on inference, the way a psychologist would explain it. I really do think it's precognition. Well, and to
observe it, you have to be in the moment. That's the other thing. So, I mean, you are, the more you observe them, the more you are in the moment, maybe as well. That's just a helpful thing as well. I mean, I think you're just being more aware as well around your, what's going on around you.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's get a little deeper into your sort of theory about it's more of a mechanistic theory about the neuroscience behind this as well, right? Like, so you're saying that instead of it being like a one consciousness or this field that we pick up, like that as our brain being a tuner, that we pick up what's going on from, let's say, the ether or whatever, that it's more of a neuro, I don't know what would you say, neurochemical or a electrical process going on in your brain, and you're picking up on a future emotion or a future what? Like how, and then I think I've heard you sort of describe it in more of a, like a mechanical way.
Yeah. I'm sort of taking like I said, a sort of a contrarian position on this, because I mean, everyone nowadays is talking about non-local consciousness and, consciousness fields and sort of the idea of mind or consciousness is transcending the body and so forth. Yeah. And I don't know, I'm not that interested in consciousness. I feel like no one really knows what they mean by consciousness. It's got a million different meanings. It's basically a word for an insoluble problem. It's sort of this problem that's on the borderline of the discourses of science on the one hand, which deal in causes, physical causes, and the discourses of meaning on the other hand, the humanities, philosophy,
spirituality,
spirituality. And it's like where they overlap, they don't really mesh, and they don't match up, and they don't sync up in any way. And so you have this perpetual conflict at this overlap. And so we slap a label on it. We call it consciousness. No attempt to explain consciousness with any kind of physical theory, like even quantum mechanics, is ever going to satisfy, the spiritual, side of us. I mean, that's just not, no physical description of how the brain produces consciousness, if it produces consciousness, is ever going to satisfy people. Is ever going to satisfy people who don't want to reduce things to material, physical.
Well, I don't know about that. If it's material that we don't know about yet because we can't measure it. I mean, I think what you're saying, I don't think it takes anything spiritual away from the phenomena at all.
No, it doesn't. But I'm saying that, even if tomorrow, say, Stuart Hameroff and Roger Penrose proved that their theory of,
microtubules
and that produce consciousness, that they proved that was somehow the basis of consciousness. I don't think it would satisfy. I think that philosophers and mystics would just as flat out reject it because it just you can't mesh that onto your personal experience of being alive and aware and all that. It just doesn't, you can't be satisfied.
Pin it down. Yeah.
You can't pin it down that way. So I feel like there's no point in a way in trying to prove, or trying to establish the physical basis of consciousness. So I feel like the consciousness is kind of a big MacGuffin. It's kind of everything. Everyone's chasing this problem of consciousness. I think it's more interesting to look at these specific functions, which I do believe are very brain based, and I think precognition is one of them. And I think we are actually hot on the heels of an explanation of how, I say we, not me personally, but I think researchers in various fields are really kind of converging on an understanding of the brain that's much, that's going to go way deeper than what we can understand right now. I mean, with our current technology, we can look at levels of networks, we can look at interconnectivity of neurons. But that's a classical, it's incredibly complex, but it's something we can kind of wrap our heads around. But I think I do agree with people like Stuart Hameroff and so forth, that the real action in the brain is going on inside neurons, and that neurons themselves are going to turn out to probably be quantum computers. And so what you're going to have is a brain that's going to be characterized as, 86 billion quantum computers linked in a kind of massive internet. What we're looking at, what we're able to look at now with our imaging technology and so forth, is basically that internet level. We're not looking at what's going on at those individual nodes where quantum computing is taking place. And among the quantum computers are, obviously really amazing, fascinating things that I don't think anybody really understands yet. But one of the things that seems to characterize, a group of entangled particles in a quantum computer is you can manipulate information in ways that are spooky, that including potential
transcend
time.
time.
So I was going to say time breaks down at that level. So I mean, free will could still be a part of the equation, but your neurons know because they're 10 steps ahead of you.
So the point is, and we don't know exactly how it works. I think Stuart Hameroff is probably right. I mean, I'm guessing he is basically right that the really interesting action is going on in microtubules. But I'm not particularly interested in whether microtubules somehow become coherent across the brain. I think all that's needed is for microtubules to be sensitive to themselves in the future, 500 milliseconds in the future, or an hour in the future, or a day.
It may not matter. Yeah.
Yeah, and so basically the brain and individual parts of the brain are sensitive to what's going to happen in their future. So the brain is just communicating with itself across time, and so an experience you have at 3 p.m. an emotionally some sort of emotional upheaval you have at 3 p.m. May cause a pre-response at 2:45 p.m. That that orients you toward it. And I think that this is probably a very basic, primitive function. I would kind of bet that it's underlies the sort of the primitive consciousness of single-celled organisms, and maybe even it could even have been the first sense to have evolved. Sort of a time sense, or what I call a time eye on one of my blog posts, that basically is just a right answer detector. It just makes an optimal choice just an iota more likely. Yeah. And then in an evolutionary
framework, even could explain instinct then.
That would explain instinct, sure. And it would simply, I think, be that kind of added element that I think a lot of people are looking for to explain the arising of life in the universe, because somehow complex systems, thermodynamic universe, just maybe it's a failure of our imagination, or my imagination at least, but I agree with a lot of smart people out there like Rupert Sheldrake and so forth. It just doesn't hang together. It can't quite explain, the arising of life and the way life is somehow able to orient toward the good, or toward its optimal, or toward optimal states. And some very smart people have proposed that it's precisely this quantum process called post-selection, which is a feature of the really cool retrocausation experiments that are being done lately, that basically life is post-selecting on optimal outcomes, and that explains potentially the arising of life, and it sort of explains how life just sort of tends that little kind of thing that gives life its edge. And that makes life kind of prevail. Life will find a way. I keep, that phrase from Jurassic Park, it kind of always goes through my head, but I really think it's kind of a very primitive, precognition at that level is kind of the wrong word, because we're not even talking about cognition, but we're talking about responsiveness to rewards in the future. And the most basic reward is, of course, survival. So, you have a single-celled organism where it's, microtubules are, responding to decisions it's going to make in its future. And like a turn to the right means it's going to get a post-selected, it's going to be measured again, that the particles in that microtubule will be measured again, versus turn to the left, they won't be, because the organism has died. So you'll have a tendency to make the right decision and to turn to the right direction and orient itself in the right way. But it's it's going to be a very weak, slight tendency probably, but anyway, that's the idea.
No, it's really interesting. So I was thinking when you were talking about that, before you mentioned his name, like, wouldn't that still fit in, or couldn't it still fit in with morphic resonance? Like, it doesn't mean that this sort of precog of some event through time it may not fit with that, because I don't know if Rupert actually can actually explain physically what's going on. I mean, maybe it's still compatible, but then as I'm thinking about that, I look down at the bookshelf and I look right at morphic resonance, which is in the middle of our shelf, and then you mentioned Rupert Sheldrake right after that. So that's my own little
I have that
precognition. You probably do.
Yeah. No. Well, I think the problem with morphic resonance is it kind of is one of these. I'm sorry to say, I like Rupert Sheldrake's work, but I feel it's very hand wavy. It's like he's imagining this morphic fields. I'm really opposed to the idea of fields. You may be able to tell from reading my blog post, but it's like I feel like that's kind of a mental special effect. We're kind of imagining somehow fields, and it helps us imagine how forms in nature imprint on other forms, and somehow, but it's just like there's no model for how that works. I think what I'm proposing, even though it's got its hand wavy elements, I mean, we don't know how it works exactly in cells. I mean, where I'm sort of offering a speculation, but I think that this mechanism of informational time travel from the future, the future influencing the past or the future influencing the present, offers a way to explain these phenomena, like the tendency for organisms to find their optimal form, and the tendency for organisms to do what they need to do to survive, and so forth. It offers, I think, a more realistic, slightly less hand-wavy kind of mechanism for that. Because, I think that Rupert Sheldrake's morphic fields, that feels very much like a Platonic, ideal form somehow magically coming down and manipulating reality, but that I don't see that just doesn't seem very realistic to me. So, I think the ultimate, again, sort of like when we're talking about synchronicity, the effect is the same, but what I'm proposing is that this is sort of a mechanism for how it might work.
Do you notice any correlation with emotion?
Yes, totally. In the model I'm proposing, precognition is basically just memory, but in reverse. It's memory for the future. And as we know, memory is facilitated by strong emotion. It's subject to distortion. So it's like this idea that you're going to precognize things perfectly, or or whatever. That's just totally wrong. Your precognition is going to be the same, just as sort of subject to the vagaries of distortion and sort of symbolic stuff that your memory for the past is. The main difference between precognition and memory, as we ordinarily understand it, is that with memory, we have a degree of ability to do what's called source monitoring. In psychology, source monitoring is the ability to know how you know something. So, I know, the Normans invaded England in 1066 because I kind of have a memory of sitting in a classroom and hearing the lecturer, write that on a chalkboard. I have sort of a memory of how I know that information. It may be wrong, and in fact, we know that those, our sort of autobiographical memory is subject to constant morphing over time. And, what I imagine, the way I imagine learning that may be totally wrong compared to if I can't have a, God's, video recorder, if you play that back, it might be totally different. But still, we have a sense of how we know information in our past, which does not apply to information from our future. And this is one of the reasons people ignore it. People miss it, they ignore it, they misinterpret it. Because, you have a vision, a sudden flash of a vision of a plane crash or something. Most people, it's not ever going to cross their minds that, I'm having a preview of a very emotionally striking news story that I'm going to see the next day on the news. They're instead going to imagine, they're just going to interpret it in some different way. It's like, that was just, I was just imagining things or whatever, and they'll forget about it. Or whatever. They're not going to have any way to place that information. The metaphor I sometimes use is that it's like like you get a letter with no return address. You don't know who it came from, and you're going to just sort of assume it's junk mail and you throw it out. And I think that's what a lot of precognitive information is like, at least on a conscious level. We don't really know what to do with it. We don't recognize it when we see it. We interpret it in all kinds of different ways, so it's influencing us, if it does influence us, on an unconscious level, but not really consciously.
That's interesting, because I've heard the same thing for ghosts. For a ghost to be around, there's got to be a certain level of emotion involved to leave sort of an imprint on the fabric or whatever.
Well, I've got, I'm not. This is sort of the next sort of phase in my work. I'm sort of starting to turn my attention. I'm trying to finish a book right now that kind of sort of summarizes the work I've been doing over the last few years on my blog. But I'm kind of in my last few posts, I've kind of started looking at these other paranormal phenomena to see how much this model can apply to those too, including things like hauntings, also things like past life stuff, reincarnation. And I think that there's a lot of potential for this idea of memory for our future learning experiences as being a real operative, potentially interesting explanation for some, not all maybe, but some things like hauntings. For instance, sort of the idea would be if tomorrow you're going to read about like some tragic death that occurred at a spot that you're standing, like say you're walking down a dark alley in a strange city or whatever, and and the next day somehow you're going to encounter a story about a tragedy that occurred right in that spot. You might be, particularly if you're kind of liable to if you're very imaginative, if you're the kind of person who's liable to have a sort of hallucination, you might have a precognitive hallucination of that story that you're going to read the next day, and you're going to interpret it as a ghost. And this is another thing I think is another way in which precognition is like memory is that it's very strongly triggered by place. The hippocampus, which is sort of, you can sort of describe it as the brain's librarian. It also contains it sort of controls our memory. It's sort of the archivist of our long-term memory. It also contains our maps of space. And, this is why there's this close connection between space and memory. For instance, the ancient art of memory, the classical orators would create memory images, and they would plant them in imaginary spaces, like memory palaces, for instance. And, if space is a memory trigger. I mean, when you're walking down the street, you remember things associated with a certain place.
I know how to do that. I read a book on it, and I can do it. You could you picture a place from your childhood you recognize, and you can walk through the house and place things in certain spots.
It works fantastically well.
Amazing.
I'm doing college. I wish more people knew about it. I've written about it, and there are lots of good books on it, and it's an amazing tool. So you're absolutely right, and it's but you then how powerful that place thing is. I mean, it's a really powerful trigger for memory. Well, I feel like this could potentially explain some hauntings, and there are some good time slip experiences in the literature, and I wrote about one of them on my blog. This happened, I don't know, I think it was I feel like it was in the 50s maybe, and this was in Scotland, and a woman was walking home at night, and she was walking home from a cocktail party, where she wasn't really drunk or anything like that. She'd had one drink, but she saw this battle. She saw these soldiers, or it was like the aftermath of a battle, and they were ancient warriors on this field near her village, and it was it was the damnedest thing, this vision of these warriors, and they were taking a certain path, through this field that was kind of unusual, and they were carrying torches and stuff like that. And she knew, and everybody knew in her village knew, that this was the historical probable site of a very famous battle from the 6th century called the Battle of Nectansmere, where the Picts in Scotland fought off the Northumbrian army. And anyway, so she thought she had seen, basically like a time slip. She saw all these warriors there. Well, a researcher from the Society for Psychical Research, interviewed her, and he basically agreed with her conclusion. But if you look at the details of the case, she subsequently read up on the Battle of Nectan's Mere and the archaeology associated with it, and learned, for instance, that, the shape of the original lake, Nectan's Mere was the name of a sort of a lake that had been there in the past, but was no longer existing in the landscape. And the strange path that she had seen the soldiers take would have taken them around the edge of this lake that no longer existed. So it matched this thing that she read in a journal article subsequent to her experience. Now here's the crucial detail. Subsequently to that, archaeologists figured out that, this village was not the site of the Battle of Nectan's Mere. It took place in this other place, miles away. So she couldn't have actually seen the Battle of Nectan's Mere. She was, I suggest, I can't prove this obviously, but I would suggest she was having a kind of premonition or a precognition, precognitive hallucination, perhaps facilitated by having a few drinks or whatever, of this journal article about the Battle of Nectan's Mere.
Wow.
So, and this idea that we are potentially precognizing reading experiences in our future. Actually, the idea really comes from the pioneer of precognitive dream research in the 1920s, J.W. Dunn. He wrote this. He was an aeronautical engineer, a fly fisherman, soldier in the Boer War, and he noticed as a young man he started having dreams that corresponded to things happening subsequent in his life. And he was a very rationalistic, kind of skeptical, kind of science-minded guy. And so he didn't accept the sort of existing explanations that were flying around at that time, like telepathy and the sort of the theosophical ideas like astral travel and stuff like that. He didn't accept this. And so he started keeping records of his dreams and correlating them to subsequent events. And he discovered that, he would have dreams about events in the news, for instance, but he, in some cases, was able to determine that he wasn't precognizing the actual event out in space-time. He was precognizing the news story. Whenever there was a discrepancy of some kind between the news story or the way he found out about a piece of information and the actual event, it was like a tracer that enabled him to determine that his precognition was of the learning experience of reading about this event, not the event itself. Like the most famous example was a dream he had about a volcano eruption. And specifically, in the second part of his dream, he was trying to alert the authorities. It was on a French island somehow, and he was trying to alert the authorities that 4,000 people were about to die in this volcano eruption, and the number 4,000 kept coming up. Well, a few days later, he gets the newspaper and reads the story about the explosion of Mont Pelée on the island of Martinique, and killed 40,000 people. It's ultimately it turned out that the actual death toll was like 30,000 or 36,000, like that. So it didn't have anything to do with 4 or 40 or anything like that. So he knew that what he was precognizing was the newspaper article. He wasn't precognizing the actual event. And I've found this again and again, going back through the literature of precognition, that people precognize reading experiences all the time. And I think this is a really sort of, it's something that people haven't really, they've noted, they've credited Dunn with this observation, but no one's really pushed it to sort of see if it can explain other phenomena. So that was a long way of answering your question about hauntings and ghosts.
No, but you've got some great examples of sci-fi writers and stuff too, which I don't know if there's something to do with the type of information that's there and all that, but I mean, it's really new stuff that I've never heard about, that, you know, stuff that people are writing about and then it happens later on. Yeah.
Right. Phil Dick obviously is the famous example of a precognitive writer, and only because it's become almost a game for his biographers to kind of find new examples of precognition in his writing. I mean, there's so many people have written about that, and it's great. I mean, it's like Anthony Peake has a wonderful book called The Life of Philip K. Dick. He compiles a million examples of amazing precognitive experiences and examples where his works are precognizing, you know, subsequent things that Phil Dick was reading. But Phil Dick himself was observing this. If you read his Exegesis, which is his massive journal that he wrote during the 70s and up until his death, sort of all trying to come to grips with the mystical experience he had in 1974. I mean, he's so many examples there of precognizing what he thought. You know, he really thought that he was precognizing like journal articles. He had this way of, I mean, he was really interested in sort of pop science stuff, and so he would precognize, you know, the latest kind of pop science obsession, you know, and things he would read in Newsweek or Time magazine or whatever, like split brain research. You know, he was working, he was all ready to submit his novel Scanner Darkly, and one of the themes of the book is that the main character, Bob Arctor, his brain hemispheres have become detached because of his abuse of substance D, this drug, and he's ready to submit this manuscript, and suddenly he comes upon this journal article that describes split brain research, and he'd never heard of this stuff before, so he had to write a letter to his publisher saying, okay, I need a couple more months here because I have to do all this research on split brain research because I thought this was my idea, and it turns out that, you know, but this was happening again and again and again, and I've got some really good examples of this that I'm going to put in the book that I'm working on right now.
Yeah, we'll save some of those.
It's brand new, but you know, it's just, you can find endless examples. But he's by no means the first. No,
there's some stuff on your blog that you had, which is really interesting because it's not so much sci-fi as real mysteries that are coming to light, right? Like the Face on Mars, for example, and people had
sure. Yeah. Right. Well, I had a post on that. Like, you have two major American artists, in one case, a Japanese American artist, who really uncannily precognized the sort of face on Mars, which was discovered by the Viking orbiters in 1976. One of them being Jack Kirby, the comics, artist, who in the early 60s, I believe, he wrote a story called The Face on Mars, and it was about these astronauts who discover this giant stone face on Mars, and one of them has this vision of this interplanetary war that destroyed the planet, and the sculptor Isamu Noguchi, the American-Japanese sculptor, he created he envisioned an earthwork that would be built in the desert somewhere on Earth to be viewed from Mars, and it's this face, and he photographed it, and the face looks just, I mean, uncannily like the photographs of the face on Mars that were taken, the original photographs, the low resolution photographs that were taken of the face on Mars in 1976. And the thing is, this was to be a sort of a monument to memorialize humanity in the aftermath of nuclear war. And part of so what they were precognizing, if it was precognition, I mean, I can't prove obviously that this was precognition, but what's uncanny is they weren't just precognizing a face on Mars. They were precognizing this whole meme that surrounds the face on Mars, the idea of an ancient civilization destroyed in nuclear war. In the Noguchi's case, the roles were flipped. The idea was the face would be viewed from Mars, but it would be about Earth's destruction in nuclear war. But the point is, it's just sort of uncanny that both of these artists had this same idea. Now, you could say it's in the zeitgeist, whatever. Where I'm sort of going with this is that I think the zeitgeist is really, in a lot of ways, this kind of precognitive process, that we're all sort of swimming in this precognitive soup, and that artists particularly are very tuned to it, and they're precognizing each other. They're precognizing kind of powerful memes that they will encounter in their future, and they're sort of scooping each other that way. There's a famous theory of literary influence by the literary critic Harold Bloom called the anxiety of influence. And the idea is that artists are really anxious they want to be the first. They want to be, you don't want to be the second to have an idea. You need to be the first to have an idea. And we're particularly threatened by artists that came before us, because, they had the good ideas first. And so we're kind of jealous and we kind of distort them and everything like that.
Like inventors kind of.
Right, exactly. And I'm kind of proposing that there's this opposite, there's this other literally precognitive thing going on where artists are like literally trying to scoop each other precognitively, and so ideas in a sense come from the future. Like artists precognize their own books that they will write. I think that Phil Dick was actually describing this in some of his journal entries. I mean, he was having these hypnagogic visions of manuscripts and galley proofs and stuff. I think he was like literally precognizing what he was going to write in the future, as well as precognizing other people's books. And I've got, I've written about this on my blog too.
Wow.
So are people that can actually tune that? Do you think that's any way to explain like psychics or anything like that? Clairvoyance?
Oh, yeah. I'm sorry, what?
Clairvoyance.
What did you say?
Yeah, he's just talking about psychic and clairvoyance, or clair of many, whatever that is, clairaudience, clair whatever.
Clairvoyance. Yeah, I mean, well, the current accepted term for clairvoyance is remote viewing. I mean, that's kind of a more less psychic-y sounding term, but I think that remote viewing, I think very likely it's really precognizing information that the remote viewer will gain in the future. Now, this is people are gonna turn off your program when they hear me say that, because it's a very controversial idea, and I've talked to remote viewers about this, and I'm not a professional remote viewer by any means, so it's like I want to tread lightly on their experience, but certainly some cases, including some famous cases of remote viewing, show evidence that the remote viewer was actually precognizing their feedback that they were going to get later, and not the site, the target in real time. And I'm going to write. I've written a little bit about this, but it's a controversial idea, and I know some remote viewers will like totally balk at that, and I don't blame them, because if you've spent your life doing this and you have a certain experience of what you're doing, it's like I can't tell them that's not right, and I certainly haven't. I'm not an expert at the entire literature on remote viewing, but there are cases that fit this precognitive model. And Ed May, who was head of the Stargate program, he was head of the SRI. The Stargate program during the sort of 80s and early 90s, the last decade. He basically made the same argument that remote viewing is basically precognition.
So I wonder if the rate of synchronicity would increase the closer you got to an event horizon.
You mean of a black hole event horizon?
Yeah, that's right.
I don't know.
As time compresses. I'm going to take a second here and jump into, we had a couple listener questions sent in from a friend of the show, James Cruz.
Oh, cool.
He's got one here. Does the notion of how archetypes show up as coincidences, precognitions, or as synchronicities include the precept that we are creating our perceptions of these archetypes in our realities by projecting them into our day-to-day lives due to the reinforcing formative nature of these time loops?
Well, I think we are. I don't know exactly if I'm getting the question correct, but I am not a believer in archetypes. I think archetypes, are an effect of precognition. They're an illusion that arises when we are precognitive creatures who orient toward rewards in our future and are not aware of that fact. And the fact is, nobody believes in precognition, and nobody even imagines that we're precognitive. And very few people who imagine that we're precognitive believe that we're precognitive. So we're going to interpret these things as in all kinds of other ways. Now, archetypes have been pretty successfully debunked, actually, by historians of psychiatry and historians of Jung's movement. This is a very interesting story, and it's actually only something I've really delved into in the last year or so, but it's really, really interesting that at the time Jung was working, the first few decades of the last century, the European culture, we don't realize this in America, but European culture, particularly the German-speaking culture, was saturated with like ancient mythology, Eastern religion, Egyptian religion. I mean, this was fascinating to people. Everyone was delving into the pagan roots of European culture and Germanic culture, and Egypt was on. Everybody was just gaga about ancient mythology. So it wasn't just Jung. And at this time, the Theosophical Publishing House actually was publishing all this stuff. And guess who was the audience for these books? Well, it was precisely the people Jung was seeing in his clinic, and Jung himself. And some of the smoking gun evidence that Jung always cited for the collective unconscious turns out to be stuff that he had read that was on his bookshelf, and stuff that his patients were reading. And you can kind of tell when someone, when a great thinker is sort of defensive of their core idea, when they're always making these assurances that, well, the obvious counter argument, can't really be true. Well, he was doing this constantly in all of his case studies. He promises that this patient didn't know the symbolic meaning of X, Y, and Z. Whatever ancient mythological motif showed up in their dream. This patient couldn't possibly know that archetype or that myth, but in fact, these patients were reading this stuff. He was reading this stuff. So historians have really kind of been able to show that this is the whole idea of a collective unconscious and archetypes is this. It's really basically this projection of basically Jung's bookshelf onto the cosmos, and a lot of it, they were producing this stuff in there. It's a truism in any kind of therapy that the patient will produce magically. They'll produce dreams and fantasies and blah 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 that match the theoretical orientation of the doctor. So, for instance, Freud's patients all magically produced these Oedipus fantasies and all this stuff about infantile sexuality and seduction and phallic symbols and all that stuff that you associate with Freudian psychoanalysis. Well, Jung's patients were likewise producing ancient myths, just like obediently. They would come into the office, they would produce some dream that was about, that had, some ancient Egyptian, symbolism, and Jung would go, aha, and he, yes, this proves, the collective unconscious. But it's the therapy clinic is a sort of it's an echo chamber, and it's very easy for particularly for brilliant, ambitious thinkers like Jung to be self-deceived about the material that's emerging, and if it seems to confirm their pet theory, they'll run with it. And it's been a very inspiring theory for a lot of people, and people love the idea of a collective unconscious and archetypes and all that. But there's really not much support for that idea. And at the same time, I'm also a little bit biased against Jung because I come from an anthropology background, and at the time that Jung was working, anthropologists and linguists, they were already able to explain the sort of commonalities in sort of culture and symbolism that occur around the world. I mean, you don't need to invoke a collective unconscious or archetypes to explain these things. I mean, for humans, we're all biologically the same. So we all go through the same basic life experiences and sort of feel the same basic, dilemmas and traumas, around, aging and birth and death and whatnot. And so, so yes, these same motifs are going to show up again and again and again across cultures, but there's no real evidence for anything like a collective unconscious or for archetypes. And so I think that, but yes, when you have these synchronicities, I think that a lot of what was happening in Jung's clinic was that the patients were precognizing what he was going to, precognizing some exciting situation in the clinic. And the most famous example of synchronicity, of course, I write about this on my blog, is the woman who dreamed about a man or someone handing her a piece of scarab jewelry. And the next day, she's telling this dream, and this scarab beetle shows up at the window, and he opens the window and hands her this beetle. And goes, here's your scarab. Well, and of course he then explained this as synchronicity, blah, blah, blah. Well, no, I mean, she had a precognitive dream about that event that happened in his consulting room. And probably the dream was as much about his subsequent launching into a discourse about the meaning of the scarab in Egyptian religion. And it was probably a really meaningful moment for this woman. Yeah. A turning point for her. And so it was precisely the kind of thing that precognitive unconscious homes in on. And so that's, I think that's the source of this idea of archetypes. I mean, in her case, and because it was Jung was obsessed with ancient myths, and in fact, he himself had a vision of a scarab a few years before. So he was totally thrilled when she comes up with this dream, and he launches into this great explanation about scarabs. And for her, it was just like this mind-blowing moment. Of course, I mean, and here you have the great Dr. Jung, incredibly excited about your little dream and telling you its grand meaning in the cosmos. So, I think that is the ultimate source of the idea of archetypes. But I think that precognition is at the root of them. I think that probably the most powerful learning experiences we have are probably the ones that we oriented towards unconsciously and precognitively, because suddenly they manifest in our lives and we're blown away. It's like we've arrived somewhere where we were intended to be, and the world is kind of addressing us like, we're special. And that's what a synchronicity feels like. Even a little tiny synchronicity, feels that way. But when a big synchronicity happens, especially, it's like, holy shit, the world is, it's arranging itself around me and wants to teach me something. That's how it feels. So I think that probably precognition is at the basis of these ideas like the collective unconscious and archetypes.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
Well said.
Yeah,
I have one more question.
Oh,
from
yeah,
James.
okay. Because I was going to build on that question a bit about time loops and stuff. But go ahead with that.
You can save your building. You keep building over there. His second question is just your thoughts on the holographic or simulated universe theory and how that would fit in with the model.
Yeah, I've thought about this, and I've got friends, the same way I've got friends, in fact, some of the same friends who are really into the multiverse theory and the many worlds theory. They're the same ones that they think the simulated universe theory is cool. I mean, it is cool in some ways, but I find that super depressing. Honestly, the thought that we're living in a simulation, that really I find deflating, and I just really can't get with it.
Huh.
But part of it's personal preference. I just don't want to live in a simulation, so I'm biased. But I have to say, I think that there's also this tendency for people to create a theory of the universe that sort of matches the most exciting technology of their time. So, back in the late Middle Ages, the universe was a clock. And it's like, oh my God, that's the most exciting idea in the world, that the universe could be a clock. And then of course the universe was a computer, a couple decades ago. Well, now the universe is a simulation. Well, it's like, I kind of feel like this is just kind of a passing fad, because our most exciting, mind-blowing technologies right now are simulations. And so it's very exciting for people to come to theorize about how the universe might be a simulation. I suppose it's possible. And it certainly, if the universe is a simulation, then my whole idea about archetypes and stuff is wrong, because then the universe very well could be programmed, to have these, basic meanings sort of pre-made in the fabric of space-time. It's like
a character type kind of.
Archetypes could be real, but I honestly, it just doesn't convince me at all.
But the simulation theory, I mean, then if you do think about it, then who made the simulation, right? I mean, to me, it's not as depressing as like somebody.
Maybe we could bust out of the simulation.
Exactly. The key word.
Right.
There you have it.
So your new book is going to be going a little further on this, into more of the other paranormal stuff. Do you have? I mean, there's a ton of questions around that.
No, the book I'm trying to finish up right now is basically kind of a version of blog up till now, but with more footnotes. A lot more data, a lot more kind of supporting. It's like because it's a blog, it's easy to kind of gloss the evidence. I give a lot more evidence, and I go a lot into depth on a lot of case studies. In fact, I go into great depth on some pretty interesting occurrences in Freud's clinic and Jung's clinic.
Wow.
There's some pretty cool stuff that I'm trying to put in there. It's just I have no time, because I have a 14-month-old and I have a day job that so it's like I'm trying to eke out a few hours every weekend to work on it. It's a long process. So we'll see when it gets done. But that's the idea. But I am starting to delve into other paranormal phenomena. I started out actually my original. When I was, I guess my blog originally I started over 10 years ago now, but I was writing mostly about science fiction. But then I really got into UFOs. I was like really, writing about ufology for a while, and it was actually ufology that kind of deflected me into the psychic stuff. It was Jacques Vallée's work that really inspired me, and I realized, we need to figure out this consciousness thing before we can figure out what UFOs are and figure out what's going on with precognitive and other potential psychic phenomena, ESP phenomena. So that's kind of what got me into this in the first place. So I feel like I'm kind of going to circle back eventually and sort of maybe approach the UFO question, the haunting, things like ghosts and hauntings and all that. See what I can bring that's maybe a little bit new to those problems by thinking in terms of precognition. I don't know. That's kind of where I see myself kind of going, but we'll see.
Yeah, well, it'd be interesting to circle back around to the UFOs. I saw a bunch of people commenting on your website about the ETH, like the extraterrestrial hypothesis.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think like most people who get into this stuff, that's your first stop, right? I mean, it's like, well, oh wow, this means aliens. And so, yeah, I know I have some old posts on the blog where I'm arguing for the ETH, and it's like, well, like, and then like later, I was like, okay, maybe I spoke a little too soon.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm not committed to that at all. Although I think people have been too. I do think people have too readily sort of thrown out that idea, and I feel like it should be kept on the table. Some version of it, it's like certainly, aliens are not flying here in their spaceships. I mean, that's ridiculous. But alien drones, self-replicating alien drones originating in some ancient, civilization that may itself be long dead. That's a perfectly reasonable idea, and I think there's no reason not to keep that idea on the table.
Well, I think you could keep the ET coming from spacecraft on the table too. Who knows? We're finding all kinds of planets out there. You never know. It might not be that harder than you think to travel faster than light. So, I mean, I'm not all for that hypothesis either, but I like to keep them all on the table. Really, it's a pretty complex subject.
Sure. No, you're absolutely right.
And if you need a test subject for your ESP stuff, you can use Graham. You can shock him. You can shock him and shit if you need to.
Yeah, that's what I want. That's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for a test subject to come to my lab, and I'll keep you in a box, and yeah, it's going to be uncomfortable for you.
Measure my precog response to electrical shocks.
Sensory deprivation and stuff, but yeah, and then some electric shocks when you don't precognize accurately. But by the end of it, I guarantee you're going to be really a Superman.
The synchronicity master, eh?
No problem. No problem. Where do I sign? Right on. Well, thanks for your time here tonight, Eric. Where can our I know you're on Twitter. I forget your handle off the top of my head, but where can our listeners track you down?
Yeah, it's just thenightshirt.com. It's all one word. Don't ask me to explain the reasoning for that name, but there is a reason. And same on Twitter. It's The Night Shirt.
Well, and I don't think people should wait for your book either. Like, you've got hours and hours and hours of great blogs on
and the book
on your
is not
website.
And the book is not just going to be a rehash. I mean, the book is not. It's all brand new stuff. I'm not saying but it's on the same sort of theme.
Yeah, because it's just you got so much
like
good content out there already.
For the book.
Yeah.
That's
well, thank you.
Yeah, we'll link to all that in the show notes too, for sure. Graham will get all that in there.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, this has been really a lot of fun.
Right on. Yeah. Well, keep in touch, and when you do get the book out, if you do or whatever, I'll come back on and we'll continue.
Absolutely, that'd be fun.
All right.
We'll shock Graham.
Okay.
All right. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that, especially.
Okay. Thanks, Eric.
Okay. Take care.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
And that was our chat with Dr. Eric Wargo.
That was fun.
That was a fun one.
I'd like to think that our audience is open-minded enough to just to try and like everybody said, meditate on that. Meditate on that.
Our audience, we got the best audience. They'll have no problem with this.
I have a hard time with thinking that there's no like collective unconscious or no like ether and all that in there. And why?
Hard as you can right in the nose. Break your nose.
Why?
See if free will lets you.
Yeah. Well, I didn't.
Free will it.
Free will it.
Free will yourself in the nose.
Yeah, I like that. I like the idea. It's interesting because when he talked about let's say the young example with the scarab, maybe that was precog. Like, who knows which way it goes, right? We don't have enough proof either way.
No, we don't. I like the idea of it is that both are neither mundane.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, they're both pretty groundbreaking.
I mean, his comes across a little more mechanistic, but I still think it's pretty out there.
Yeah, I'll take it for sure. It's a good explanation as I've heard, for sure.
Yeah.
We should ask them about a ripple stick. Well, that is. I know. I meant to. That is a ripple stick. That's exactly a ripple stick. The ripple before the stick is precognition. The water's precognitive.
Is that what that's? It's been so long since we talked about that. Is that what
the ripple stick
explain that
is?
Again. So the water's coming down.
The ripple stick
is
the
sticking out of the water
before the stick in the water.
Isn't that just caused from the water hitting the stick?
Goes backwards upstream.
Yeah, it's like a wake from a boat, right?
Goes upstream.
Except the boat's moving and the stick's staying, right?
Yeah.
Huh.
That's why we call it a ripple stick.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a logical explanation.
Stick, which is exactly precognition.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I'm sure there's a logical explanation for the stick.
But it's just a fun analogy?
That's right.
Oh.
We fucking coined it. Actually, I don't think we coined it. We heard it someplace else.
It was one of our guests, I think, that brought it up way back, like in the first 30 episodes. It was a thing
we talked about for like 30 or 40 episodes.
No, not that many.
Ugh. This is what I deal with.
Anyways, we could have got a little bit more into him with UFOs and stuff, but anyways.
Well, he had said it was late.
Yeah, it was late for
him. We're already
but,
pushing.
Yeah. But yeah, that's really interesting, man. I was reading some of his blogs, and the whole Face on Mars thing is pretty cool. People were like,
that was
creating that before it came up. Like, why a face? It could be pyramid on Mars.
It was another one of those interesting ones where I went to track him down on Twitter, and he was following it. We were following each other.
Oh, wow, that's cool. Yeah. I think when we're going to have that we're going to have a couple guys on about synchronicity a couple of years back. I think that's when we were looking.
Dr. Kirby
Kirby Surprise was the other dude.
That's it. Kirby.
Let's
Kirby Surprise just sounds dirty.
You don't put the in front of it.
Check out.
It's probably doctor, not the. Or Mister. When they're this big, they call you Mister.
Mr. Kirby Surprise. Dr. Kirby. Dr. Surprise. Sounds like a villain. Anyway, check out Grimerica.ca/support, guys. Sign up for a monthly if there can help us keep having these long, uninterrupted, commercial-free, paywall-free chats. We'd give it all to you guys for free. All we ask is that you throw a couple bucks our way, if you can, when you can. There's a bunch of different monthlies there.
Yeah, it helps pay the bills, man.
That's right.
We didn't plan on this being such an investment.
Bills, fix broken cables, all sorts of stuff.
Need more cables, actually.
Yeah, send Graham to Red Pill Expo.
Oh, that'll be coming out of my pocket, buddy.
Well, yeah, of course it will be. But maybe one day I won't have to. And then we could do more things like that.
Yeah, that would be cool.
Because then you could fly there. Like, that's the thing. It's like, fucking boom.
Have a 9-hour drive?
If you had a little budget, like, I just get a flight.
Yeah.
Ding, ding.
Oh, imagine that. Jeez.
9 hours each way.
I'd just settle for some gas money.
That's it. What was fucking Paradigm was like 46 hours just crammed into 4 days.
Yeah, but this wouldn't happen if we didn't go to Paradigm. Yeah.
That's what happens when you don't sleep for 4 days. You start a podcast.
Yeah.
So sign up for a monthly if you can. If not, there's a bunch of different ways there you can help the show that don't cost you a thing. That include reviewing the show, sharing the show, tweet the show, Facebook the show, Insta, whatever the show. Sign people up for the newsletter, Grimerica.ca/news. Get your Grimerica swag, Grimerica.ca/swag. Spam the shit out of Graham. What else? The Hangouts?
That's about it. Yeah, the Hangouts.
Check out the Hangouts. So No Agenda has their Mastodon thing. We just got
the chats.
A normal old, the good old chats. I was telling one of the guys in there that they should start a No Agenda one. Could be fun.
Well, yeah, but they're kind of have that instance in Mastodon, right? Do we want to? No, we don't want to do that one.
We don't have enough. I said when we got to 500, we're at like 150.
Right.
We might never get to 500. Oh, one day. Anyway, that's Grimerica.ca/hangout. And it's just a little weird chat room where we got a bunch of people that are having a ball all the time. It really
perpetual. I like to call it the perpetual chats.
It really is a... He just likes to call it the chats. Check out the chats. I'll see you in the chats. I should have made the link, Grimerica.ca/the chats. Anyway, guys, check out the chats if you so see fit. There's a bunch of dudes in there, a couple women having a good time, having some crazy conversations. There's a lot of dash cam
It's like the
pics
party
flying
line.
around.
It's like the party line from
Yeah,
the
pretty
80s.
much. It's like a way more sophisticated party line with a lot of pictures of people's day. I like that.
Yeah,
though.
there is some. Yeah, you're kind of in there quite a bit.
I like to pop in, and I'll just scroll by and look at the pictures.
Did you
That's
watch my videos of me driving to?
No.
No, you didn't. So you don't even you just. Whenever it comes to
Why
me,
do I
you're just
wanna watch
ignoring
a video
it.
of you driving
Because
to fucking Saskatchewan when I don't need a fucking little teaser for my drive through Saskatchewan.
No, it's just like a pic. I mean, it was just you were doing the same thing.
Yeah. Did you watch it?
No.
There you have it.
Because you said like 10 of them, and I'm not going to sit there and watch them all.
Mine were just pictures.
Right. I thought there was a video. No.
No, I don't do videos.
I knew you'd bug me about the song that was playing on the radio. That's
What
why
was
I
it?
thought you. I'm not going to tell you now.
I'll check it out. It's still in the chat.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And the rule in the chat is if you don't have Avatar, I will kick your ass out.
Oh no, you got to bring Bill back in. Though. Bill the show.
Oh, shit. Yeah, Bill Anderson.
Oh, you got his name? You know his name?
Yeah.
It's really Bill?
Yeah.
No.
Well, there was Bill and
Could've
Ben. And so we had a Phantom Bee at the bottom. I made a choice, kicked the one bee out. The bee was still there, so I had to kick out the other bee. So Bill or Ben, you guys are welcome to come back, but you're just creeping us out down there. We thought maybe you're CIA. So this is why
He
we
was getting a nickname Bill the Show because he
That's
was
right.
always hanging around but never saying anything.
And it turns out it wasn't even Bill, it was Ben.
The dude named Ben, of course.
The dude named Ben was just kicking it. So this is why we have an avatar rule, guys. So have an avatar or you're out.
No, he's just kidding. Some avatars, people aren't getting them to work properly. They're saying,
No, it's
how's my avatar?
I can
Or the
double
avatar's
check.
back
If I
and forth.
click on their name, it'll go to their picture. And if there's a picture there.
Well, that's why. So there's
then
a
I will-
double avatar setting
then I will
like, for
hear
your homepage.
No,
or
there's
your...
not. It just seems to take a while to update sometimes.
Oh, okay.
But I check. And if you have an avatar there, I won't kick you out. But so far, the only one people I kicked out is Bill and Ben. And accidentally Gainer, because I thought it was you. I kick you out when you piss me off.
I've been kicked out a few times.
Now you just leave.
I'm just used
Now
to
you
it.
just leave when I come in. Darren's here, I'm out.
Honestly, I never notice you coming in. I have a hard time paying attention to who's in there.
To the avatars?
Yeah.
Okay, guys. Thanks for listening. And we will see you next week.
want a good score for my synchronicity. If Graham reads it out, then Darren might give it to me. Hey, don't you please read it low, yeah.
I'm a rambling Graham with synchronicities all over the web. And Darren is skeptical about everyone and don't believe it yet.
If they make you laugh, if they make you cry, if they blow your mind, why not go online to Grimerica.ca/support?